Good evening and welcome to the Late Debate. Tonight we'll be marking the first anniversary of Theresa May's premiership and asking what happens next. But first we turn to the distressing saga of Grenfell Tower. The Grenfell fire is one of London's biggest post-war disasters. It might also be one of the biggest political scandals in recent history. There are many questions for the public inquiry. Why was the cladding so combustible? Why was it used? Why wasn't there a sprinkler system? Were warnings about the fire risk ignored? Were there adequate fire escapes? Was council cost-cutting a factor? London's mayor says they're questions with wide-ranging implications.
They ask us as a country to look at our approach to a range of issues such as how we respond to disasters and look after their victims, how we make sure our buildings, and in particular tall buildings, are safe for those who occupy them, how we ensure that public bodies listen to and respect all local residents, how we house some of the least well-off people in our society.
Shame on Kensington and Chelsea Council.
There was another angry exchange last night at the latest meeting between local residents, Kensington and Chelsea Council and the police. While in the Commons, MPs discussed the inquiry and its terms of reference.
We do not have to wait for a public inquiry to say the building regulations should be reviewed.
This fire should never have happened. It should never have happened if notice had been taken of the recommendations that were made.
They should get on with offering decent, permanent homes to people who've suffered extraordinary trauma.
As we've seen and has now been acknowledged, the Council's response in the early hours and days after the fire was shockingly inadequate, possibly even criminally neglectful, we shall see.
This inquiry is going to require some very cool-headed thinking. It will not be helped by hot remarks that suggest to victims and their families that they were intentionally killed by people in government.
At Grenfell Tower, teams of police officers continue the gruelling and distressing job of searching for human remains in an attempt to identify the victims and clarify the death toll. Joining me tonight is the new Labour MP for Croydon Central, Sarah Jones, who made her maiden speech in yesterday's debate on Grenfell Tower. Her neighbour, the Conservative MP for Croydon South, Chris Philp, and the former Liberal Democrat MP for Richmond Park, Baroness Susan Kramer. Welcome, all of you. Sarah, yesterday in your maiden speech you said we failed too many people for too long. What did you mean?
Well, I think there's a whole raft of issues that we've got to deal with here. I mean, the first is the awfulness of the fire itself and the immediate response, and we need to get that right, and we need to look at actually what support are those people who are the survivors and the local residents getting from society. And I think there's all kinds of things that have gone wrong over the last couple of weeks that we need to look at. But the bigger question that I was raising in my debate, in my speech, was these people had said that there was a problem before and nothing had been done. And I think there's a real issue in society at the moment that a lot of people feel like they haven't really got a voice. They haven't got somebody who will listen to what they're saying, hear what they're saying and act. And I think that has caused a lot of wider issues and problems with politics that we've got at the moment.
Chris, is this because governments of all hues have got it wrong for so long?
Well, I think we need to find out exactly why and how this happened. Clearly, what happened at Grenfell just a few weeks ago should never have happened. It shouldn't happen in a modern, well-developed country. And we need to find out exactly what went wrong and why, and make sure it can never ever happen again. And it's particularly important that we have an interim report from the judge, so we can't wait 1 or 2 years for the full report.
Do you think that's going to happen?
Yes, I do. Well, we know we have. It was Damien Green said yesterday in the House there would be an early interim report. Rather like after the tram crash in Croydon, we had a report in just a few weeks from the Rail Board. I'd like to see an interim report in a matter of a few weeks, certainly no more than a few months. So if there are pressing lessons to learn, and I'm sure there are, we get on with fixing the problems immediately, not waiting until the end of the review process.
Susan, do you think we can trace the origins back to austerity? You were a minister in the coalition government that was responsible for the cutbacks of austerity.
Well, I mean, ironically, when it comes to the building regulations, it was in coalition that we got the agreement to review the safety building codes. And that was supposed to have been completed. In fact, before today, it was targeted for completion 2016-2017. And it got abandoned abandoned as soon as so we no longer had coalition government or shoved into a side stream or whatever else. So I don't think you can put it down to an answer that's as simplistic as that. I do think there are immediate issues. We have got to listen to the people in the community who've been so either very directly or very closely indirectly damaged as a result of all of this, and make sure they're housed, that they're able to rebuild their future. It's got to be critical, and we've got to get that expert report as soon as possible to make sure that every other building is safe, or else we deal with it. Those are urgent. But then there's fundamental problems, and those I think we need to tackle, of trust in local government. Does local government have the powers that it needs? Susan, does it relate to local people?
Go back to what Sarah said, and you seem to be saying the same thing, that there's no one for people to speak to, no one to speak up for them. Surely that's the job of local politicians, councillors and MPs. There must be some terrible disconnect between voters and politicians, if that's right.
No, I think there absolutely is, and I think we need to tackle that right now, which means there are lots of things we need to do. So first of all, we need to make sure the people who are currently in hotels are being put into proper temporary accommodation that suits their needs, and that then we're finding them permanent housing. We have to do that fast. We also have to build confidence back up in local government and in government as a whole by making sure we're funding the changes that we need to make. So Croydon Council, my council, as a Labour council, was the first to say we'll put retrofit sprinklers into the tall tower blocks. Lots of councils are going to do similar things. There isn't the money for it because they've got 40% less funding than they had previously. So government yesterday was sort of unclear. They sort of said, well, if councils haven't got the money, we'll fund it. But if they have it, it was very murky. And I think the government need to be very clear about saying, we will provide the funds to put this right. And they haven't done that yet. So there's things we can do before the interim report that really have to be done to try and put some of that trust back into the political situation.
Chris, do you think the new leadership of KNC can regain that trust? It seems very unlikely from what people were saying last night at the meeting with residents.
I think it was absolutely right that the chief executive and the leader of Kensington Council both resigned quickly, because they did make a mess of the aftermath. There is no question about that. And I think Sadiq Khan hinted at an interesting point. When a tragedy of this scale occurs, an individual borough or district doesn't really have the resources to deal with it. We saw that very clearly. So I think when this kind of thing happens in the future, we should see a regional response to the tragedy, rather than expecting one borough to cope alone. So there are lessons we can certainly learn there. On the funding point, of course, funding hasn't been cut by 40% because other streams like business rate retention have filled that up. So that's a bit of a disingenuous figure. But the government did say yesterday that where there are recommendations in Croydon, and there are also, I think, 232 blocks in Birmingham where they're going to retrofit sprinklers, if the fire authority recommends it, and if the council can demonstrate they don't have the resources to take those vital measures, the government will step in and provide the funding. So Damien Green was very clear yesterday in the Commons that money would not prevent our tower blocks being made safe as a matter of urgency.
About how that's going to work.
Well, he announced it yesterday in the Commons.
Well, but I think money really matters. I don't think we can get away from that. That is important for the quality of local services and local capacity. But there's something else that's been happening over a long period of time. Most people couldn't tell you who their local councillor was. Most people have no idea what happens at that local council level.
Whose fault is that? Is that the politicians' fault?
I think it's. I think it's happened, I think, inch by inch over time, that so much power has been sucked away and has gone centrally. Now, in London, we've had some return, but it's to the London level. And people aren't engaged with their local councils. Their local council doesn't engage much with them. It responds to a sort of problem basis, rather, I think, than taking a proactive position. But we've somehow got to create that and recreate it. To me, the symptom was that failure to cope. First of all, we should never have had the fire. But when it happened, the inability of basically one of the richest councils in the country to respond in a way that met the needs of a fairly limited number of people just tells you that there's something fundamental that has broken down here. And I don't want to have glib answers to it. I think it's serious.
Wouldn't any local authority have been overwhelmed by that?
Yes, potentially, and that should have been recognised much earlier. And I think there were things that were done in the first few days, like, there wasn't a Cobra. There were things at the national level that went wrong as well. And I think everybody on all sides has accepted that there were mistakes that were made. But I think whenever I've been in the chamber, there've been several debates about Grenfell since it happened. And whenever I've been there, you get the sense that DCLG is the department and the ministers are kind of trying to catch up with events, and it's partly they haven't got enough staff in DCLG because the numbers were reduced so much, so there aren't the people to do the jobs that they need to do at the national level, and they're pulling in people from across. There've been problems, and a lot of them are about money, and a lot of them are about trust in the local community.
I mean, COBRA has been meeting, as you know, very frequently. There was a period of time, it was probably the first 48 hours, when the council couldn't cope. It's not surprising because it's just a London Borough Council, and this was a sort of national tragedy. It's the biggest fire we've had since the Second World War in a residential block. So I think a regional response is required in the future, a sort of pan-London response, or regional if it's somewhere else. But the government, has sort of sprung into action when it became clear that K&C weren't coping. That cuts across all departments. I know the ministers are working incredibly hard, whether it's Nick Hurd or Sajid Javid or the housing minister. So I think the response after the first 48 hours improved dramatically, but there are definitely lessons that could and should and will be learned.
But Chris, you've got to listen to the people. And when you hear them, they are still hugely angry. So we can say, oh, that's improved and that's improved and that's improved. To the people who are on the ground and living this day by day and minute by minute, this is still
that's exactly
destructive
the
of who they are and of their future.
I think politicians do that, where we want to argue for our point of view and the status quo or whatever position we're arguing for, and we're not actually listening to what people are saying.
Well, no one is defending the status quo. No one is defending the status quo at all.
Sarah, Chris, Susan, just for the moment, thanks for that. I'm sure we'll return to Grenfell Tower in future programmes. Hopefully then we'll be able to speak to a government minister about the issues. We did invite no less than 3 of them to take part in this programme, but none of them were available. Now we're going to take a look at this week's anniversary. It's 12 months since Theresa May became Prime Minister, and what a year it's been.
Her Majesty the Queen has asked me to form a new government.
No deal for Britain is better than a bad deal.
We agreed that the government should call a general election.
When Theresa May walked into Downing Street exactly 1 year ago today, her mission statement had been fine-tuned and rehearsed, ready for this moment.
We will make Britain a country that works not for a privileged few, but for every one of us.
But the new Prime Minister's biggest challenge was Brexit. In January, in a speech at Lancaster House, she declared herself fully signed up to a hard Brexit.
What I am proposing cannot mean membership of the single market.
In March, the Prime Minister was faced with the first of 3 fatal terror attacks in London, when pedestrians were knocked down on Westminster Bridge and a police officer stabbed at the gates of Parliament.
I have just chaired a meeting of the government's emergency committee, COBRA, following the sick and depraved terrorist attack on the streets of our capital.
The following month, Mrs May was again outside the front door to number 10.
I have just chaired a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election.
The opinion polls pointed to a landslide win, but a botched manifesto, a U-turn over social care.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
And her refusal to take part in a TV debate left the voters lukewarm. Twice the campaign was halted because of terrorism, prompting this from the Prime Minister after the London Bridge attacks.
It is time to say enough is enough.
When the voters delivered their verdict on June the 8th, Theresa May had swapped a small majority for a minority government.
It must also be humiliating for Theresa May to have seen that reversal in fortune, to have experienced near electoral defeat. She came so close to losing her grip on power altogether.
On her first anniversary in Downing Street, Mrs May doesn't have much to celebrate, but she is still there, just. Still with me are Sarah Jones, Chris Philp and Baroness Susan Kramer. So who of you thinks Mrs May will still be in Downing Street in 12 months' time?
It's too soon to tell, isn't it? I mean, it's a very interesting, as a new MP, it's very interesting watching the way that that she's handling her government, and the way that every single debate that you have that sense that they're just trying to get through it, to get out the other side, to get to the summer recess, so that they can sort of pause for breath and try and regroup. I mean, it's a very dynamic atmosphere in Parliament, and it feels like one where anything could happen. And I think now we've got the Brexit debate and the bill being published, I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to get through Parliament. She's going to have to rely on the DUP in many ways when she might not be able to. I think she's not going to be able to do the things that she might want to do, so it's going to be a very stymied Parliament where, you know, nothing much gets done apart from trying to do this Brexit bill. So I could see anything happening.
Chris, you might have been being polite there, but your silence was quite audible when I asked that question.
Well, ladies first, of course. Look, I think what I saw yesterday at the 1922 committee, which Theresa May addressed, was a room full of Conservatives fully behind the Prime Minister and the programme she wants to get on with. I mean, for me, one of the biggest bits of news this week were the jobs figures we haven't talked about. We've got record 42-year low unemployment in this country. And given we inherited a car crash economy from Labour 7 years ago, and things have been very difficult in the European continent, the fact we've turned around the job situation is incredible news. And I think Conservatives are very motivated to make sure we carry on that record of economic growth and jobs creation in the years ahead. And there's, one area where you don't necessarily need primary legislation to get that done. We're all very focused on continuing that growth story, and of course as the economy grows, then we can find more money, £8 billion extra for the NHS. And I hope all of us, all parties, can agree that putting £8 billion extra into the NHS is a good thing, and we can all get behind that, and I'm expecting it.
So will she be in Downing Street to celebrate her second anniversary?
What? I predicted a few years ago that Donald Trump would never become president. I predicted we'd vote to remain in the European Union, and I predicted that we'd win the recent election by a very large margin.
Okay, so what's your prediction for Theresa May?
So I'm now retiring from the business of making political predictions. Yeah. What I will tell you with certainty is that the party are fully behind her, and we're going to get on with the job of delivering a sensible, well-negotiated Brexit, including a good free trade deal, and we're going to keep growing the economy, and that 42-year record low unemployment is going to carry on.
Fully behind her, but wielding knives.
Yes, I was going to say. I mean, I've never seen a party more shattered, quite frankly. And you spend time in Parliament, you just find it out round every single corner. Look, I was sort of holding back a little bit until we saw the repeal bill which came out today in the position papers. I have never been so shocked by pieces of legislation that have been handed over. The repeal bill is basically a Henry VIII bill. It essentially says when you pull all the bits apart, and there aren't that many bits in it, that government ministers will decide which bits of EU law they're going to keep and which ones they don't want, and they'll push them through this method called statutory instruments, which gives Parliament almost no say. It is a huge,
voted on by MPs.
They can't amend them, and you know that, and they have almost no debate. It is a huge constitutional power grab, and it's shocking. And then you look at the position papers, there is almost nothing in them. Really serious issues like how we keep our nuclear power plants open after we leave. Really important, serious. Will people have radioisotopes? I mean, that's just one of the. It's so tiny, so little in content. This is really, really a problem.
This is faux outrage from someone who doesn't want us to leave the European Union. And I voted Remain, by the way, but the public didn't. And the reason that there are going to be SIs used, as you well know,
you can't successfully leave with this.
We're attempting to transpose all European law and regulations into UK law. There are 40 years worth of regulations. You can't do that via primary legislation. We'd be legislating for the next 50 years. We've got to do it in the next 2 years, and that does mean we have to use SIs. The House can then, afterwards, take time to go back and change things and tinker and meddle, but there's no way we can get 40 years worth of European law.
Sarah, you're new to Parliament. Are you going to get your head around all this?
Yes, so I agree in terms of the bill itself. There are fundamental flaws, and Labour have said very clearly we couldn't vote for it as it is at the moment. I just want to go back to what Chris started by saying, which was talking about the economy and jobs. One of the things I said in my maiden speech is that we cannot, as a Parliament, as a House, deny the reality of the lives of the people we are here to serve. It is not the case that people in Croydon are satisfied with the lives that they are living in terms of the low pay, in terms of huge housing costs, in terms of big delays and problems in the health service, in terms of the commuting southern commuters. And there are a range of issues where the reality is, and we saw it. You must have seen it if you were canvassing at all during the election. You must have seen the reality of people's lives. And the biggest issue, in Croydon in our election was teachers and parents saying, there is not enough funding for schools. Public sector pay, all these issues, they are real issues, and they are the reason why Theresa May did not get the majority that she wanted to get.
Chris, how worried are you that the Tory party is teetering on the edge of a leadership contest this summer?
Well, I don't think it is. Like I said, everyone was behind her yesterday. And look, I'm proud to be part of a government that has put up the minimum wage, by 26% in the last few years. It's gone up to £7.50. It was £5.93. Now, so look, we've put up the minimum wage massively. We've cut tax for people on low incomes, £1,000 more a year. Look, I'm not saying it's perfect, but nor do I recognise this sort of vision of dystopian sort of hell that you're painting.
It's not dystopian hell. Hang on. People have not had a pay rise for a very long time.
Pay's going up at 2% a year.
The cost of living is going up. People's wages aren't. It's very difficult. And there are things that could be done. And there are choices that governments make about how to help a situation. And your government
like
is
creating
not
jobs.
Helping.
Susan, can I ask you? You served in a government where Theresa May was a Secretary of State.
Yes.
How long do you give her?
I reckon the Tory party conference will deal with her once and for all when we get to the autumn. They just need to be collectively in the same room to put the knife in. You know, it's an et tu brute. That's everyone in together.
Can I turn to another topic which you two as Croydon MPs will know very well? You as a former Transport Minister must know about too. Southern trains. What a mess.
Complete mess. I mean, if you're asking me, that I would have stripped this away from the existing management long ago. There's, there is. I take the view, and I took the view when I was in the department, that when things go wrong, it nearly always, it's somewhere it's management. That's because if you're a good management, you build strong relationships with your workforce, you can take change through. Taking change through is one of the core skills that you ask of a management. And if it thinks it's necessary, to go to just one driver and no guard on the train, which to me makes a great deal of sense, but you do it with your workforce, taking them with you, and that's what good management is about. And when it breaks down in a way, it has such an impact
Chris
on
was here a year
passengers,
ago saying something had to be done, and now we're facing another 3 strikes.
I think the franchise is too big. I think the franchise in due course should be broken up, and I do agree that the management of GTR have been shockingly incompetent over a period of time. Of course, the Gibb report, which came out or was published last week, said that over the last year, the official industrial action over 30 days of strikes, and we've got 3 more coming in just a couple of weeks' time, and the work to rule by both ASLEF and the RMT, and I'm quoting, were the primary causes. So I call on ASLEF to return to normal working practice, which is working 5 days a week. I call on them to cancel
they're not listening. They've just called 3 more strikes.
Well,
how culpable are the unions?
They're wrong to do that.
So I think I hate to constantly agree with Susan, but she makes a very good point, which is that if you get to the point where everything breaks down, it's bad management, and everybody.
So the unions aren't culpable at all.
There's different issues, right? There's the strike and the issue of the DOO and what kind of support staff what kind of staff we need on trains. And I think the fact that today the Secretary of State has said that Govia are going to put 50 more staff on the trains is an acceptance that the unions are making a good argument, right? And in the Gibb report, there was 1 paragraph on the unions, and that was all. There are huge issues with Southern, and again, it's like defending the status quo all the time. We know there's huge problems with.
Chris, I was going to ask you whether we're going to be in the same position here for now, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. Sorry, we've run out of time. Thank you all for coming in and talking to us this evening. That's it from the Late Debate. We'll be back in the autumn with a new programme just before the party conferences. For the moment, thank you for watching and good night.